In clause 5.2, ISO 27001 describes the requirements towards defining a so-called information security policy. Now here is the ISO 27001 standard, and as you can see attached to lecture 5.2, there is a piece of mandatory documented information, which is the information security policy. So organizations have to provide it in order to get certified. Now, let's have a look at the required activity. So this one is pretty straightforward. Top management has to establish an information security policy. And when I say top management, then I really mean top management. A policy of such importance cannot be defined or approved by anyone below that hierarchy level. Now remember how in the very beginning, our first step in implementing the ISMS was to obtain management support. That's exactly one of the reasons why it's an absolute necessity to have that support right from the start, because there are certain things that top management cannot delegate away from them. Now, the requirements of clause 5.2 directly relate to the highlighted tasks in our project plan, which are to develop the policy, obtain approval for the policy, and then to publish or communicate it within the organization. Now, you might be wondering, what is a policy? Now, first, it's important to understand that creating and updating documentation is a process that requires careful planning and attention to detail. This means that organizations need to identify how their documentation should be structured and choose a suitable documentation approach. In an ISMS, you typically have policies, topic-specific policies, sometimes called standards, and procedures. They work together to ensure consistency, compliance, and effectiveness. So they basically form a structured hierarchy where policies set the direction, topic-specific policies define the rules, and procedures provide the step-by-step instructions. We already covered this in the lecture on clause 7.5, which was about documented information. So, getting back to the very top of our documentation pyramid, this is where we have the information security policy. A policy is a high-level document that outlines the organization's intent and objectives regarding a specific topic. It provides overall guidance without getting into technical details. So in ISO 27001, only one policy is explicitly required, and that's the information security policy. This policy sets the foundation for the entire ISMS by defining the organization's commitment to information security, its objectives, and its overall approach to managing risks. Now please feel free to jump back to the lecture on clause 7.5 if you want to have a little refresher about the different types of documents that we have within a management system. Now, here you can see the cover page of an information security policy, namely the policy that is attached as a downloadable resource to this course. So feel free to visit the course resources and download your copy to get started with writing and developing your own information security policy. Now, let's have a look at the mandatory contents that every policy must have. So when it comes to creating an effective information security policy, ISO 27001 mandates us to consider a couple of aspects. First of all, it's important to consider the unique needs and challenges of your organization. The policy should reflect the current business situation, culture, and information security issues that your organization is facing. It should be tailored to align with the purpose and culture of your organization while still being comprehensive. Additionally, it should be easily understandable so that users of the policy can identify with its strategic direction and feel a connection to its goals. Something we've already talked about are information security objectives. The information security policy should either outline the information security objectives for the organization or explain the process for setting these objectives. Now, in large organizations, top management should establish high-level objectives, and the information security policy should provide a framework for how these objectives will be defined and implemented within the scope of the ISMS. Now, by doing so, the policy will give a clear sense of direction to all relevant parties and ensure everyone is working towards the same goals. Now, the information security policy should also include a clear and concise statement from top management regarding their commitment to fulfilling all information security requirements. This demonstrates the organization's commitment to complying with laws and regulations that are related to information security and protects the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of their sensitive corporate data. Now finally, the policy must include a clear declaration of support from top management for the continual improvement of the ISMS. By stating this principle or commitment in the policy, everyone within the scope of the ISMS will be aware of the organization's commitment to ongoing improvement. And this is very important if you want to create a culture of security that values and prioritizes the protection of sensitive information. Now, once your information security policy is done, there are still a couple of things that need to be considered. First of all, and that's very important, the policy must be documented and made accessible to all parties within the scope of the ISMS. Now, the form of the documentation is up to the organization to decide, but if you have, let's say, a template, for example, you should use it. If you have a certain SharePoint, if you have a certain documentation tool where your other policies are stored, it's a very good idea to just use it and to build upon the existing processes and structures that you already have. Now, in addition, the policy has to be formally acknowledged by the members of the organization that are within the scope of the ISMS. This is usually done by making them sign a copy of the policy or complete a training that includes the current version of the information security policy. Now, clear and effective communication is crucial in implementing the policy, as it has to be communicated to all persons within the scope of the ISMS in a format and language that is easily understandable. Now, finally, you can also think about communicating the policy to external interested parties, such as your contractors, subcontractors, customers, and maybe even regulators. So this is a strategic decision, and if you decide on doing that, you should make sure that no sensitive information or confidential information is included in the policy if you decide to share it with external parties. And that's what you need to know about the information security policy.